President Biden toured parts of the Northeast ravaged by the remnants of Hurricane Ida on Tuesday. The storm brought tornadoes and flash flooding, killing at least 27 people in New Jersey alone. The president is also visiting Queens, New York, where more than a dozen people died. After approving major disaster declarations for both states on Monday, the White House is calling on Congress to pass a short-term spending bill that would include $10 billion in disaster relief for Hurricane Ida. In a meeting with local officials in New Jersey earlier, President Biden called the storm a chance to acknowledge the reality of global warming.
For decades, scientists have warned of extreme weather would be more extreme, and climate change was here, and we're living through it now. We don't have any more time. Every part of the country is getting hit by extreme weather. And we're now living in real time what the country's going to look like. And if we don't do something, we can't turn it back very much, but we can prevent it from getting worse.
Plus, millions of jobless Americans who relied on federal assistance during the pandemic will have to survive without the government safety net. The White House allowed the federal enhanced unemployment benefits to expire Monday with little pushback. An estimated 7.5 million people received the weekly supplemental checks over the last 18 months. The administration is now focused on passing two multi-trillion-dollar measures to boost economic growth in the long term. Meanwhile, the Delta variant appears to be straining the short-term economic recovery. The latest jobs report showed the nation added only 235,000 jobs in August, below expectations. Finally, the White House says it is working to get all remaining Americans and at-risk Afghans out of Afghanistan. It follows reports over the weekend that the Taliban blocked 1,000 people from taking off at an airport in the northern part of the country. Secretary of State Antony Blinken denied those reports. However, he did say the Taliban had prevented some charter flights from departing because passengers did not have valid travel documents. The White House says there are less than 100 U.S. citizens left in Afghanistan. For more, let's bring in Weijia Jiang, Alayna Treene, and Franco Ordoñez. Weijia is CBS News senior White House correspondent. Alayna is a congressional reporter for Axios, and Franco is a White House correspondent for NPR. Welcome to all of you. Weijia, let me start with you. How did President Biden address larger issues during his visit to areas hit hard by Ida?
Well, we've been hearing this from President Biden for quite some time now, but this certainly was timely for him to deliver his message that the climate crisis has arrived. Just look around and see the damage it's doing, and to make the case that the time to invest is now, which coincided with a memo that we obtained here at CBS News from the Director of Communications, Kate Bedingfield, to House Democrats and their comms teams to really tell that story, right? As they start focusing on these pieces of legislation to tell the president's story of how he wants to invest in the future, not only in infrastructure, but with climate change policies weaved into that so-called human infrastructure bill to start making sure that the message is delivered. And they are recycling some of the same language we saw from the Biden campaign, which is that this proposition is really something that boils down to a choice between Scranton, Pennsylvania, and Park Avenue, trying to make the case for workers along the way if all of these policies are implemented. And so we really heard this a lot from President Biden today, warning of all the effects of climate change to come and saying that if we do not invest now, we're going to end up having to pay to recover like we are in those areas that he is visiting, and that, it is time for Congress to take some action. But the path to passage, as I'm sure, the others will tell you, is very difficult, right? Because especially for anything having to do with major climate policies, Democrats are going to have to rely on that reconciliation bill and not have a single defector, but that's going to take some convincing.
And Franco, here's some of what the president said while visiting Queens, New York, in the wake of that destruction from Hurricane Ida. Let's listen to that.
When I talk about building back better, and Chuck is fighting for my program, our program on the Hill, when I talk about building back better, I mean you can't build to what it was before this last storm. You got to build better so if the storm occurred again, there would be no damage. There would be. But that's not going to stop us, though, because if we just do that, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse, because the storms are going to get worse and worse and worse.
You know, between Hurricane Ida and the Afghanistan withdrawal, it's been an especially challenging few weeks for this White House. Explain how the Biden administration is trying to shift the focus now.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that it's been a tough week for the Biden administration. You can also add the very difficult job numbers that the president, or the job numbers that came out last week that were pretty low, that the president blamed on the spreading of the pandemic. There's no question that the president is trying to kind of shift the focus from these very difficult weeks. He wants, he wants to talk about different things. I mean, he ran on being the steady hand, bringing the United States back to the world stage in a positive manner, as well as getting the pandemic kind of taken care of from a physical standpoint, but also from an economical standpoint. So that's why he's having these discussions. He really wants to turn the page to the domestic agenda. He wants to talk about things that the American people care about and kind of move on from a really tough week. And that's why you're hearing some of these messages that he has been saying over. These are the same kind of messages about that we heard about his infrastructure plan, about his spending plan, as well as about his economic plans. That there is a need not only to put pieces back together, but to put them back in a stronger fashion.
And on that domestic agenda, Alayna, Democrats are about to start work on social policy bills, which could significantly change the nation's social safety net. What are the big ticket items? And tell us about the fight over universal paid leave.
Well, Elaine, they have an uphill battle on this bill, for sure. The House, well, first of all, the House and the Senate are still on their recess. The Senate officially returns next week, the House not coming back until September 20th. But we will see work from the committee level. We've seen it so far, but really we're going to start seeing it in a public forum starting Thursday when the House Ways and Means Committee begins their markup of this bill. And they've released a big chunk of their text today, and part of it was the universal child care and paid leave options. And that's one thing that Democrats are really pushing for, and actually something that I'd say most Democrats, including moderate Democrats and some of the more progressive members, are aligned on. The big problem, I think, that we're really going to see is that overall price tag, the $3.5 trillion. Moderate members are very concerned about it. We always hear about Senator Joe Manchin, but there are a lot of people in the House as well who are uncomfortable with having that large of a number and know that they're going to get hammered on it in 2022 if it remains that high. So we're going to really start to see some of the contours of what this massive bill will look like. We know that the committees have been given a soft deadline, as they refer to it, of finishing their different sections of the text by September 15th. That deadline is coming up very quickly. It's next week. And so as we start to see the components of this bill, I think we're going to really begin to see where they haggle over the numbers and how they message on this.
Weijia, the nation's hospitals, meantime, are filled with the greatest number of COVID patients since the pandemic began. How is the Biden administration responding, and what can you tell us about the president's planned coronavirus speech?
Well, there's not much we can tell you in terms of details, because the White House is saying very little, only that it's going to include a six-pronged strategy for the president to lay out to fight the Delta variant and to boost vaccinations. But it's difficult to imagine what more they can do, quite frankly, given everything that they've already thrown at trying to increase the number of vaccinations, short of any policy change or any more mandates along the way, perhaps pressuring the private sector even more to do that, since the president has made clear that he will not mandate, public citizens to do that, aside from the public workers that he's already talked about. We expect he will talk about vaccine boosters, which has been a little confusing in the past weeks because initially the administration had planned to start making those boosters available starting September 20th. And Dr. Fauci recently told us that there might be a delay for the Moderna vaccine, which would mean that only Pfizer would be available for a booster beginning on September 20th. So perhaps the president will offer more clarity about that. But Elaine, I think that what we're seeing is a real frustration from the president and the administration because his poll numbers are lagging, even when it comes to his handling of the pandemic that was so strong before. And I think whatever he says on Thursday, they are claiming it's going to be a significant speech. But again, based on all of our reporting and what we have seen from the administration, it is difficult to imagine what this new strategy will look like in terms of its newness, perhaps just more doubling down on what's already out there.
We'll certainly be watching for that and any new themes, as you note. Well, Franco, some 26 Republican senators want President Biden to release information related to the Americans and at-risk Afghans remaining in Afghanistan. Here's what Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said about the withdrawal earlier.
Hope I'm wrong, but I think the decision to entirely pull out was a mistake, and it wasn't handled very well anyway. We left people behind enemy lines. We left friends and colleagues over there. It was pretty much of a botched job, even if you thought leaving entirely was a good idea. I do think our decision to withdraw entirely makes it more likely that we'd have a repeat of what happened in 9/11.
So, Franco, how is Secretary of State Antony Blinken trying to address all of this from Doha, Qatar?
Yeah, it's been very difficult for the administration kind of dealing with this. As that, clip from McConnell just pointed out, there's a difference between the decision to leave Afghanistan than how the administration left Afghanistan. And it's not just Republicans who are concerned about how the evacuation was conducted. There are still now about 100 Americans who want to leave, according to the administration, and thousands of Afghan partners who are interested in going. And that has been a very difficult challenge. There's been reports recently of Americans and Afghan partners trying to get out of the country, but as you noted, and as the clip played earlier, who were stuck in different parts of Afghanistan, unable to leave. Some charter flights reportedly being held up for various reasons. Now, Blinken is in Qatar this week with Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, where there are tens of thousands of Afghans at a U.S. military base, and he gave an update on this. And as you note, he said that they are working on this, and they're working on it very diligently. Now, they are saying they're trying to hold the Taliban to their promise that they will allow Americans and anyone with proper paperwork to leave. But it really shows the difficulty that this administration faces trying to rely on the Taliban, who was the United States' sworn enemy for the last 2 decades during this war. It's a very difficult predicament for this administration, and that's why you're hearing so much pushback from members of all of Biden's cabinet.
Right, a difficult predicament as people have raised this question of what exactly is the leverage that the Biden administration has over the Taliban, especially at this moment in time. We'll continue to watch that. Well, shifting gears, Alayna, in the wake of the Texas ruling, House Democrats are planning a vote to codify abortion rights into federal law. You wrote for Axios that Democrats are itching for a political fight over abortion rights ahead of the midterms. Why is that?
Well, Elaine, it's from a political standpoint, something that Democrats think will help them win in 2022. And as you know, we were just laying out with regard to Afghanistan and the president's poll numbers and the economy and coronavirus, from a political standpoint, at least right now, this is an issue that they think they can win on, where others they're maybe struggling with as much. And so they're putting a lot of energy toward looking at this rule, and they're really hoping that they can get Republicans to weigh in on this and even defend it, because they think that it's the kind of law that will face a lot of backlash. And we spoke with several people within leadership in the House and Senate, as well as outside sources from a legal perspective of this. And one of the key things they said is just the creativity of this Texas law. The fact that someone could sue their aunt, one person was pointing out, for driving someone to the hospital, is something that they think is not going to sit well with voters. The problem here is really how this shakes out over time. And a lot of people aren't sure whether this is even going to be withheld, as we see, potential lawsuits coming up about this in the future. And so right now, they're really trying to put a lot of attention toward this issue, trying to make abortion a more prominent issue from a political perspective as they head into campaign season.
All right, we'll continue to watch it all. Weijia Jiang, Alayna Treene, and Franco Ordoñez, thank you all very much.